Good day, folks, and welcome to another edition of Lumberjack Logic Live. I'm live in New Hampshire with some very, very special guests, and I'll get into that in just a second, but we have some breaking news for you. The New Hampshire Attorney General has sent a letter back to these folks who are working on this, and it's wild, people. You're going to just be shocked at the startling admissions, but actually then on the flip side, how they're lacking the ability to actually come up with real reforms. This is going to show you an inside look at the malfeasance of our government and their want to not do anything while stating that they're doing something. It will blow your mind. I'm serious. This is going to be worth every second of your time. So I'm going to introduce my special guest today. We're actually in the studio of Tom Murray out here with the Government Integrity Project. And I want to let you know where you can follow them. And that's at GOVINT Pro on Twitter, at GOVINT Pro, or X, I guess it's called now,
X.
Right? X. And then I've also got Ken Eyring. He's also with the Government Integrity Project. And you can also go check them out at gipamerica.org. And then we also have, right to my right here, we've got Heather Mullins. She's at Talk Mullins on X. Mm-hmm. So, and then just really want to thank my sponsor really quickly. That's Midas Gold Group, MidasGoldGroup.com. You can text Lumberjack to 23. I can't even remember, but just go check them out at MidasGoldGroup.com. I don't have the information in front of me. We're broadcasting, and you built this studio, and this is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
This is going to be the most professional recording of Lumberjack Logic people ever see. And so, both Tom and Ken have been on this show before. Many of you are familiar. They've been really working hard on election integrity out here in New Hampshire. And I'm going to turn this over to Ken right now, and he's going to give you a 5-minute overview, like a detailed brief of what's going on. And then we're going to get into some specific questions. But again, this report is mind-blowing. The admission from the AG, not just once, but really this has been admitted to now. Is this the third go-round? And yet there's no real reforms, but they keep doing the same thing. But wait till you hear these numbers. It's crazy. So Ken, take it away.
Yeah, it's the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So before I get into this, I'd like to just share with the viewers how egregious what took place on September 13th, 2022. That's the state primary. And in order to set this up, I want to go back to what the AG investigated in Exeter back in 2019. They provided a cease and desist letter to those town election officials based upon something that was insignificant. It was minor compared to what took place in Windham. Yet, when the AG wrote their letter to Windham officials based upon a complaint that Tom and I filed well over a year ago, it took about 55 weeks for them to finally put together their findings. They downplay what took place here in Windham, and their solution is what they provided after the debacle of the November 3rd, 2020 election, which everybody knows is a Windham incident. But let me get into this. So in Exeter, in their election, they reported that there were 2,795 ballots cast, and there were 2,685 voters marked on the checklist. So that's a difference of 110 more ballots than voters, right?
Easy, man.
Now, you'd think, that's a large number, and it is. And
especially considering how small the number of people were that were voting, and you're talking about a discrepancy of 110.
Absolutely. But 2,795, keep that in mind.
Yes.
So quotes from their cease and desist letter from the AG to their town officials. The mistakes, however, were unavoidable and should have been discovered on election night prior to announcing the results. On election night, this figure was not cross-checked with either the marked checklist or by conducting an inventory of the cast and uncast ballots. Although calculation errors do occur sometimes, especially after a long election day, a discrepancy of this magnitude should have been detected on election night prior to the announcement of the results. the town should have reconciled the reported number of ballots cast with the number of voters marked off the checklist. That was cease and desist. Do not do this anymore. You have screwed up, and this is unacceptable. That's the tone of this letter from the AG to Exeter town election officials. Now let's fast forward to September 13th, 2022, and the complaint that Tom and I filed. I'm just going to give just a few examples of the egregious errors that took place with zero checks and balances as defined in the letter that the AG wrote to Exeter back in 2019. The announced voters on election day in Windham was 3,724. The voters marked as having voted on the checklist, 2,765. A difference of 959 more voters were announced than actually voted. That is a heck of a lot more than 110, and a heck of a lot, that's an order of magnitude. And that's just one example of what could have and should have been cross-referenced and cross-checked and caught prior to announcing the results. Here's another one. The chain of custody records show 4,116 election day ballots were cast. That's a difference of 372 more ballots cast than voters that were announced on election night.
But the announcement was wrong.
And the announcement was close to 1,000 more voters than who had actually voted. So let me just go through a couple more numbers, and then we can really rip this apart. The moderator's worksheet shows only 2,768 ballots cast. That's a difference of 1,348 more ballots that were sealed in ballot boxes on election night than the moderator's worksheet states were cast. How can you be off by that huge number, that huge discrepancy? That's an order of magnitude more than 110, which the AG was clearly concerned about during the Exeter election. Here's one more thing, Neil,
Sure.
And then we can throw it out there. The chain of custody records shows, let me back up, the number of election day ballots that were sent to Windham by the Secretary of State was 4,970. The chain of custody records show 6,303 election day ballots were sealed in boxes on election night.
Wait, hit that number one more time.
4,970 were shipped to Windham.
That's how many ballots, blank ballots, we received.
Yes.
From the Secretary of State. 6,303 were sealed in ballot boxes per the chain of custody records. That's a difference of 1,333 more ballots were packed in ballot boxes on election night than were received from the Secretary of State. Where did those ballots come from? Why is this not an issue? Why is that downplayed by the AG's office? We could go on and on and on and on, and we did in our complaint. We laid it out on a silver platter. We provided all of the election documentation signed by election officials. None of it is our conjecture. All of it is using election materials from election day.
This is literally, look, people, this is, these are official documents. Attorney General, Department of Justice, New Hampshire. I mean, we're not dealing with conjecture. We're not dealing with, oh, gee, we think this is what happened. We are dealing with an issue where the government has actually admitted to this.
They have,
and it's all in here. These things are so nuts.
If I could just read an excerpt.
Yes.
This is from the January 7th, 2022 level. This is after the debacle of 2020, the largest numerical discrepancy in state history. And here's what they say. Windham election night results were not just imprecise, they were fundamentally flawed. Simply put, town election officials cut cornered, ignored legal obligations, and are of continuing concern, as they are not indicative of an election that was not executed to the standard of law and the expectation of voters. They admit it.
So currently right now, are all the exact same election officials that handled that currently in the same exact positions
They
going
are.
into this next primary?
That's correct.
That's
Every
correct.
one of them.
Yes, there are 10 people listed in our complaint. 9 of them are Windham election officials that oversaw the election in 2020 and the election in 2022. The 10th person is the monitor, the election monitor that was appointed by the Secretary of State and the AG jointly to make sure that this type of thing didn't happen. But it did. Even under the monitor of someone who should have been knowledgeable enough to catch all of this and should have been in a position to say, hold on, you can't reconcile this, let me show you how to do this. And yet that person couldn't reconcile all of the mismanagement of the election that took place on September 13th, 2022.
Okay, so this and I've read this letter, and I'm just to be honest, as you read it, it gets worse.
Oh yeah,
It does get worse.
It's wild.
They whitewashed the whole thing.
But hey, do me a quick favor, folks. I know there's a bunch of you on right now. Smash that like button. Let's get this stream out to some more people. This again, people. We are dealing with letters from the Attorney General. We're not dealing in conjecture. This is after the monitor was sent out there, and I brought this in to use as an example. Okay, this is a package of pens. Okay, now if I look at this package of pens right now, 2 pens are missing. I got 2, 4, 6, 8 pens, right? Of these pens, 2 of these pens are red. Now, if I come back with a number to you and I say, look, I've got 10 pens. Now, there's 8 here, right? But I say there's 8 total pens, so that's the grand tally. But I come back to you with a number that includes 4 red pens, and then 2, and then 1, and so on, so that the number actually totals 10 instead of 8. We have to reconcile this. Now, it's not hard to do. I look at this and I go back and I do another count and I say, well, there's 2 red pens. That's where the error was. Okay, let's get those out. And so that's how you reconcile something.
Yeah, this is 3rd grade math, folks.
This is unbelievable, because as you look at this letter from the Attorney General, which just came out, okay, and this was sent to Tom and Ken both, because they're working on this stuff out here. So, give them some kudos. Give them a follow, too, on Twitter at GOVINT Pro, and then Heather Mullins over here, the intrepid Heather Mullins is at Talk Mullins on Twitter. You can always go to my Twitter handle, which is at Neil E. Johnson as well. X, I keep calling it Twitter. But here's something that's really wild, and I'm going to skip ahead in this letter because I think this is one of the most. This is crazy to me. It says, so this is following the election. They haven't had anything right. And they say at 3:30 a.m. of the following day, September 14th, 2022, town officials remained unable to reconcile the total number of ballots cast in the election with the total number of voters who checked in to vote. So again, 8 pens, if I come up with, this is not hard, okay? Town officials decided to announce the votes for candidates and to return later in the morning to try and finish reconciliation. So
that's a violation of law.
That's nuts. Okay, hey, we're just going to announce it, even though we can't reconcile it. We'll just reconcile it the next day. Who the hell does that? Can you imagine if you worked at a bank?
In Exeter, the cease and desist order to Exeter officials said the town should have reconciled the reported number of ballots cast with the number of voters marked off the checklist prior to announcing the results.
Yeah, and that statute is 65979.
What's in the statute though that says like? Is
Well,
there
where they're
anything,
not
no. Is there anything in the statute specifically that says this is what should happen to states or officials that violate these statutes?
No, that's
where's
the problem.
Punishment? And maybe that's something we think of is getting someone to sponsor a bill that actually adds some sort of provision that allows us to remove people that violate these provisions.
I'll tell you who should be removed from office is the people who are in the AG's office, who aren't enforcing our election laws. And are watering down what took place. Let me give an example, okay? In the letter that was just written to the Windham election officials in response to our complaint, on page 3, it references the number of ballots cast and the moderator's worksheets, right, that they used. And it shows What do? Do I hold this up? We can probably put this full screen at some point. Maybe cut it on. We'll edit this and repost the video. But it indicates that there was only between the moderator's worksheets were updated a couple times, and it shows that there was only a difference of 8 ballots for the Republican and 3 ballots for the Democrat. Now, I just read numbers to you that showed there were hundreds in some cases and more than 1,300 in other cases. We have discrepancies that are huge, and yet it's downplayed in this report. It's unacceptable. We need to hold our election officials accountable. I served on the Committee for Voter Confidence. I was appointed by the Secretary of State. I was honored to be on that committee. And we traveled.
And can I interject here? What party affiliation was the Secretary of State?
He's Republican. The previous Secretary of State was Democrat.
Exactly. And you worked with both.
I have worked with both. Yes.
Yeah. So this is not, folks, what I'm trying to point out to you is this is not a partisan issue.
It's not.
If you are not concerned about honest, free and fair elections, what are you concerned about? I mean, because every issue rests upon this one thing. If we don't have that, where are we at? We're certainly not a representative republic.
No. And I want to jump in, if I can, for a minute. I want people that are watching, I want your viewers to watch that this letter details in specificity that the election officials actually conducted unlawful recounts behind closed doors, not in the viewing of the public, and came up with yet differing results from what was announced.
Right. And in fact, one of those changes, Tom, flipped the results of an election.
That's right. So, which is contrary to what the AG's letter says. The AG's letter is inaccurate because it said it didn't change the results. It did.
It didn't change the results from Election Day.
Correct.
This is how they cover up for our Windham election officials. They wrote, we complained, in our complaint, we stated that by changing the results out of the public eye multiple times between election night and the following recount a week later, the Windham election officials declared a different winner in District 35 state rep race.
Representative Julius Sodi's race.
But what does the AG say? The AG says the complainants alleged that one candidate was declared the loser in the election results originally announced on Election Day, declared the winner in the town's second and third corrected return of votes, and declared the loser following the Secretary of State's recounts. The complainants refer to the race between the state representative candidates Sodi and Filio for District 35, which is comprised of both Windham and Londonderry, those two towns. The Secretary of State's office conducted a recount of this race, which ultimately confirmed the original election results reported by Windham. They don't get into the fact that
it changed the result.
If you didn't have a recount, the wrong person would be serving in office right now.
That's right. So they had an election day result,
and what
a
was
recount with a different result.
And what was the problem with the recount and the mandatory filing period, Tom?
That's a great point, Ken. So let me set this up. So you have an election day result, okay?
Yes.
They announce it. And this gentleman, Julius Sodi, is the winner. And this is between two towns. It's a floterial seat. Julius Sodi's announced the winner. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Friday at 4 p.m. is the cutoff date legally to ask for a recount. Julius Sodi doesn't ask for him. Why would he? He won.
Yeah.
Subsequent to that, the Windham election officials change the results. They do unlawful recounts behind closed doors. They change the results, and now Julius Sodi is not the winner. However, he does not have a statutory recourse to ask for a recount because that statutory timeline has come and gone. So what happens is, luckily, the candidate from Londonderry, the Filio gentleman, he asks for a recount. Now, keep in mind, legally, when he finds out that he's the winner, he can declare, I don't want to do the recount anymore, and he would have been declared the winner.
So here's another thing that we should add to our list of bills to get sponsored is something that allows for any candidate running, if results are recertified, it resets the clock on their there are
great
time
point.
limitations to get a recount. So
Right.
if all of a sudden on that Saturday, his clock should have reset and he should have been given another 4 days to contest
Right.
that. So at least, I don't know if you can still submit bills this year, but for next year, we gotta.
Well, I
make some
agree with that, but
changes.
I think we also have to have people being held accountable, and
Yeah.
and the people who are put in a position of
So what-
enforcing our election laws, they need to do that.
So other than like voting people out, what are the mechanisms currently in place that allow for people to hold these officials accountable?
They should be removed from office.
Yeah.
Like what mechanisms are currently in place?
What was
though?
the town
Like, what are the-
where was it Laconia?
Laconia, they were removed. One of the moderators.
was
How'd they
removed
do
from
that?
office.
Well, it's really, a
They-
violation of your oath of office under RSA 42:1. If you're not following the Constitution, which is Part 1, Article 11, which governs elections, right? You're not issuing all of us free and fair elections. So that's a constitutional trespass on my rights.
Right.
So-
During the election in question, there were votes that were counted more than once on ballots.
Okay, I just have to say something as I sit here and listen to you two guys. You guys are national treasures, okay? You're literally quoting statutory law, Constitution, everything, right? So, the thing about Ken and Tom, and those of you who followed my channel a while know, you can go back to 2021 when I was receiving strikes because I was covering the issues in Windham, New Hampshire at that time, and there was the big meeting, and a lot of you will remember some of this. A lot of you are new to the channel, so you won't know this, but these guys have never given up this fight. And so, again, that's why I tell you to follow them through these different means, because if you want to stay abreast of what's going on and what the media isn't covering, and they don't quit. They're still engaged. They're still fighting out here in New Hampshire. And New Hampshire, one of the things that I find so amazing, so being here last night for the Trump rally and seeing this, I mean, the place was packed out. They had to turn people away. In fact,
Yeah.
I had listeners of this show who wanted to come and meet me there, and they sent me messages. We got turned away, Neil, because there's too many people. But New Hampshire, being first in the nation primary, you have them coming through here like clockwork, and the total population of this state is only like 1.5 million.
Yeah.
So it's central to everything that's going on in the nation. And, here you've got some people with the Government Integrity Project fighting the good fight. So make sure you give them a follow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting, too, just to make a note on, so we attended the Trump rally last night.
Mm-hmm.
And our governor believes, and I'll quote him, gold standards. That
Gold standard, they are the
gold standard elections. So how can you reconcile these letters? I mean, really?
It's always the people that benefit from terrible elections that seem to think they're the gold standard elections. Did you notice that?
There's another thing that's disturbing about this. We
I mean,
I gotta. Do you guys all remember, right, the CNN footage of the burning building and the mostly peaceful protests?
Yes.
I think everybody remembers this,
Yeah.
right? Here, I want to share something out of this letter that reminds me of that. It says this. This is in conclusion of the first part. It says, the Secretary of State's office subsequently conducted a recount in 2 of the Windham races. Mr. Van Loan, that's the monitor, reported that the results of those races, although not identical with the results announced by the Windham monitor at the conclusion of the primary, were essentially the same.
Yeah. It's like horseshoes and hand grenades. Well, that's close enough.
It's, to quote you earlier, and I try to keep this family friendly with language,
Yes.
but truly that is bullshit. Okay, it really is. There is really no other great word for that. This is crap. To think, okay, we'll send out this letter, and they have to admit, because the numbers
Yeah, that's
are
right.
the numbers,
These
right?
are- this is all the
That's right.
official.
It's indisputable. This
Yeah.
is their documentation,
Yeah.
not ours. And one of the things I find disturbing, a couple things I find disturbing, is there's conflicts of interest here in the AG's letter
Is
to
there
our town
like
officials.
an airplane coming through here?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the people on here is very close with the governor. Made contributions to him and his campaign. And another person on here filed in our complaint is the election monitor who was appointed by the AG and the Secretary of State. They're covering up for these people. That's a problem. Listen, if there are issues that arise in an election and it's reported, and it's something that's clearly preventable, and it is because the AG told the town of Exeter it's clearly preventable and easily to reconcile, and there are ways to do that. They're provided in the election procedure manual. There are RSAs that explain how you reconcile an election, and our town officials have not done that. This is the second federal election in a row where there are issues.
It's your garage door, right?
It's a garage door below us.
Yes.
Oh, is that what that is?
That's what that
noise.
is. Hey, I gotta mention, because I didn't have this at the time, but I've got it pulled up now. So for Midas Gold Group, you can text Lumberjack to 232-425 and receive free silver with a qualifying order, or call them at 480-360-3000. Again, these are veteran owners, not commissioned salespeople that you're dealing with. You're dealing with directly with the owners. And I really like the guys. I mean, I had another gold company reach out to me before, and then actually George Behizzi actually connected me with these guys, and I just had a really good feeling about them. So I'm a big believer in it, because I think, real money is important when we're dealing with all this fiat currency. And I don't know what happens to the dollar. To be frank, I don't know what happens to any of that, but I just want a little backup plan. So just wanted to get that out there. Back to this, though. Where do you guys want to... I mean, this is also blatantly obvious. I mean, and it's all right here in their letters.
Yeah.
What do you guys...
Well, obviously, come Tuesday, we're first in the nation. We're going to have another babysitter here in Windham. And I think it's important to note, too, that, if it's happening in your town, it's probably happening somewhere else. In fact, we know that a lot of the information and the data supports that. And unfortunately, the real problem is the Attorney General of New Hampshire not following through and doing their job. Because how can you...
And the Attorney General of New Hampshire is?
John
Fermella.
Yes.
It was actually...
And that's a good point, too. Here's another conflict of interest. John Fermella was the personal attorney for Governor Sununu prior to be appointed the Attorney General.
Yeah, but Sununu's a Republican, right? He's a good guy.
This is
Well,
non-partisan.
these are gold standard, right? According to him, right?
I just want to throw this out, because everybody's trying to turn this Democrat Republican. That is not.
That's not what it is. And everybody circles the wagons, and everybody covers for everybody else. And Governor Sununu says we have the gold standard. Tom and I show that we don't have the gold standard. Yet the AG, who's that close to the governor, tries to make it appear that, things were not quite right, but really downplays it. When you look at what happened in Windham in September of 2022, it is an order of magnitude greater than what took place in Exeter. Yet, our town did not get a cease and desist order. Our town, the second time through, the second election, federal election in a row, our town still has the same election officials overseeing our elections. Something's not right. And if the people who are tasked with making sure that our elections are run according to the Constitution and according to law, and if they don't do their jobs, they need to be removed from office. The people who are running our elections here in Windham should not be doing that.
In fact,
in my opinion, because they've proven that they don't know how to follow the laws, they don't know how to follow the procedures that will help them reconcile all the numbers. You can look at how many voters came into the polls by looking at the voter checklist. You can look at how many ballots were cast by looking at the numbers that come out of the machines. You can look at how many ballots were actually cast by counting the number of ballots that come out of the machines. There's dozens of ways to cross-reference and make sure all the numbers match, and all the numbers are supposed to match. And Tom and I talked to a town moderator that we have a very high level of confidence in, and that person said that the numbers should never be off by more than 2. More
Yes.
than 2 is unacceptable.
Well, there's
at
actually a
thousands.
percentage number that's in the election codes. It's like an infinitesimal percentage that these elections can actually be off
Well,
by.
every state election is governed by their state constitutions. I mean, obviously, we have federal laws that.
Share
also,
your favorite part of the glorious New Hampshire state constitution for us. will you?
Oh, that would be Article 10,
Yeah, please do.
right of revolution.
Yes.
I mean, our founding fathers put it in there in the document, and it's not like what people. It's not guns. It's basically to say that when you've gone ahead and redressed these issues, and I'm going to submit to you that these have not been redressed. Redress your grievances. I have a grievance. My grievance is I can't have a free and fair election in my town. This is twice now. The failure to comply with legal obligations, coupled with an election return submitted with significant defects, violation of RSA 65977. These aren't my words.
Yes.
These are the Secretary of State and Attorney General's words.
Right.
This is what's so great about this. Again, this is not conjecture.
That's right.
This
No.
is not conjecture. We're just dealing with, again,
So if
you come up with 10 ballots and
Yeah.
or 10 on the tally sheet when there's 8, it doesn't work. It's off by 20%. You got to change that. And some of these elections have been off by more than 20%.
Right.
And
If
just to
peop-
put a note on the Article 10 thing, really what it is if your government, okay, because we the people are the government.
Right.
Yes.
If your government, the people that you elect are not going to do this, then you have the right to reform your government. And that's what we're asking. We're saying, please correct this, reform this in a meaningful way so we can have a free and fair election. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I would encourage people to go to gipamerica.org on our website, and on the homepage, if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see a blog post that says the Windham complaint, September 13th, 2022 primary election. You'll be able to go into that. You'll see our complaint. You'll see that our complaint identifies many different ways, dozens of different ways to cross-reference and reconcile the different numbers of the voters and the ballots and why they didn't match and why they should have matched and how far off they were. And you'll see that we provided links to the AG to make it simple
Yeah,
for
it
them.
has
to-
all the original source documentation.
Right, and all signed by the Windham election officials with their forms, and there's multiple forms. There's a moderator's worksheet. There's the chain of custody records, and again, nothing lines up. Why did it take them 55 weeks to come to a decision to say that, and then to produce this document that, in my opinion, covers up for our Windham election officials and minimizes the impact of the fact that they couldn't reconcile an election?
I got a super chat here from James Cletus. He says, I appreciate everyone digging into this and explaining the situation. Papered ballots, federal holiday for voting day, same one-day voting and counting, voter ID for all, only military and U.S. citizens living abroad for mail-in. I would state, too, there are times where business calls you out of town, so you have to have a potential for that as well. But that's a request. So, and I've had to request a mail-in ballot in the state of Minnesota before. You fill out the form, you request it, and then only people
But
requesting that. Yes.
Can't you theoretically for the business ones, can't you do early voting for them? Where you physically have to go in and show an ID and just vote then and get an exception, but the process is still as secure as election day?
In New Hampshire, I can address that. We have absentee ballots. You have to be on the checklist in order to obtain one, first and foremost.
Right.
But the other part of that is really important. They're not following. Is that you have to fill out an affidavit. Now, an affidavit,
Yep.
as we know, is a legal instrument that has to be attested to by someone who's authorized to administer oaths
Like a notary.
with the notary.
Yeah.
Or an election official.
So absentee ballots come to New Hampshire in 1942, and in 1942 we pass a constitutional amendment pursuant to Part 2, Article 100, allowing for them, and they were notarized.
I was a notary for a while. For 5 years.
So the question is why are we not doing that now? Because it's not only in the Constitution, it's in our state statutes.
Okay, but Tom, explain why the affidavit is important.
The affidavit is so if you came in and you requested an absentee, I would know that you are who you say you are. And basically, not only that, but under the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law, if you're an absentee, Heather, and you're an in-person voter, Neil, you have to present ID as an in-person voter. Well, equal protection, as an absentee, you should do the same.
And when Neil votes, the election officials know that that was Neil filling out his ballot.
Correct.
And casting it.
Right, so equal protection, Heather should have to vote in the presence of an election official as well.
That's exactly right.
And this goes back to why not only, same day voting, all this kind of stuff, but central vote centers, central vote counting, it's junk. It's junk. You have got to bring, I have a strong theory, and those who watch my channel have heard me say this a million times. Everything that gets too big gets perverted. Okay, now, and I'm not talking about the perversion we're seeing in U.S. Senate hearing rooms. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about perverted, meaning that it deviates from its original intent. Okay, so that's the definition of what that means. So I don't care if it's big nonprofit, big healthcare, big education, big government, big corporate. Anything that gets too big always deviates from that intent and becomes perverse.
Right.
And that's the problem with central vote center. I'm an election judge. So, and I signed up for that, I was in 2022, and I'll do it again here in 2024 because I think it's important to have eyes on the ground. But because, there we are in this area, and like most of the people that are coming in, we even know them. Everybody knows everybody. So
That's right.
it polices itself by virtue of actually knowing the people that are coming in. So the election judge, and then you're supposed to have equal representation from the Republican and Democrat side. And there these people come in, and I'm like, oh, hey, Dan, and hey, Joe, and you know them. And so nobody's like frauding it out because they're right there.
Right.
And we know them, even by sight. I mean, they don't even have to whip out an ID because it's like when you go to a small community bank and you walk in the door, you don't have to present your ID every time because it's like, hey, Ken, good to see you again.
That's all part of the checks and balances.
Yeah,
Yes.
one person, one vote.
Speaking of banks, though, I've been saying this for so long that our elections need to be run like banks. So, like, when you think of a bank and how it functions, every single day, every bank in this entire country counts every last piece of paper.
Yes.
Every single day. Every day.
And you can't be off by a penny.
imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine if our banks were run like our current elections, and you went in there, and all of a sudden there was like $20,000 missing, or $20,000 that showed up, you don't know where it came from.
No big deal.
They just accidentally put, like they just had like somebody go and collect money out of an ATM, and they don't know who it was, and nobody signed a paper, and you don't know if all the ATM money was collected and like where it went. Like, just think about that for a second.
know.
You'd never put your money in that bank.
Never.
Yet our elections are run so crazy that it's sort of like your ballot should be treated like currency. Like, honestly, more than currency. Because your ballot essentially is like what you're buying with, it's an investment into the future of your country that's going to dictate everything from your health to your education to your finance to your retirement to like everything. So it's literally currency. Yet here all of a sudden our ballots are in warehouses left wide open. There's boxes of ballots going missing. There's boxes of ballots showing up that we don't know where they came from. And it's just sort of like chaos. And if you really think about it, you will never find a bank in America that's run that way. So, like, any elected official that's like, oh, we don't have the time or the resources, to do hand counts. BS. Like, hello, banks do it every single day with every single dollar, 365 days a year. And you're telling me we can't do it one day?
Well, and let's put this in an order of magnitude, right? If a teller has in their cash drawer at a bank, let's say $3,000, they actually have to account for every penny. Okay,
yes.
That's true.
So what we're actually looking at here on an order of magnitude is 300,000 pennies that they have to account for every day. They have to settle that drawer. And now we're looking, I want to go back to these numbers, 3,724, 2,765.
It's a lot of pennies.
That's a lot of freaking pennies. I mean, we are talking,
They're
that would never...
They're off by a third, by 33%.
33%.
That's unacceptable.
That would be like having this teller with, a $2,000 drawer saying, "Hey, I've got $1,300
Yeah.
for you at the end of the day." They are getting canned now. I mean, again,
Yeah, like think about it. It's exact same scenario. It's exactly the same. Yet for some reason, you get these letters back from our elected officials and attorney generals and stuff, and it's just like, oh, no big deal. I'm like, no, it's a huge deal.
Where's the outrage?
Huge deal.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
Hey, I gotta bring up. I've got Kin Rock, first super chat ever. It says here: if we made government for our benefit, why cannot one or more of the people file a complaint and have judge issue arrest warrant? Seriously, the courts were made to service the people. And this gets into, actually, it's a great question. Another one from Lewis Hawley. A thank you, but this gets into the whole. And we talked about this at length on the drive over here, with like the David Jose method and then the courts, and maybe you want to comment a little bit on that.
Yeah, basically the Constitution allows for people to file what's called a remonstrance. It's a redress of your grievance to the general legislature, and the general legislature will take that. And this is where, from a point of view of election officials, elected officials can be removed from office.
right. The problem is that when the judges were appointed, who did not, and those judges in the past did not enforce election laws. And we have an example of that, Tom.
Yeah.
And if those cases come before those judges, it's yet another circling of the wagons and nothing being done, nothing being accomplished.
Yeah. So
We need our legislature to start impeaching some of these people who've been appointed.
yeah.
Okay, guys, New Hampshire, number one target. If you could have anybody impeached right now, who would it be?
John Famella.
AG.
He's responsible ultimately for this report. And if he would get involved and make sure that the people who oversee and actually wrote this report and they were removed, then I'd be fine with AG Famella.
Can I have a number two?
Yes.
Governor Chris Sununu.
Yeah, and he's going to be gone anyways, right? I get it. I understand, but just so we know, he's not even running again, right?
He could enter back last minute. Like,
the reason why I mention his name
Yes.
is because he prevented all of this information from being meaningfully addressed. Let's face it. This is their Attorney General's information. This is wrong. Okay? So,
And the Attorney General in New Hampshire is appointed by
the governor.
the governor.
and used to be his private attorney, you said?
Correct.
Yeah.
In his personal life.
And doesn't that just seem like a little bit of a conflict of interest out there, people? It just
No, of course not. It's just like Fonnie Willis having been on the ballot in the same election that she's, charging people for investigating.
Well, yeah, and then having her bow and going on these trips and everything. But in the chat, seriously, chime in here real quickly. How many of you think that that's a conflict of interest, or do you see that as being okay? Yes, it's a conflict of interest, or no, that seems perfectly fine to you. Just curious. Want to see what everybody has to say on that.
I'll play devil's advocate here a little bit. Like, if you're going to appoint someone, you want to appoint someone that has done good work, right? If it's his job to appoint a person into that position, then he wants to use someone who he can judge accordingly. But at the same time, it is sort of a conflict of interest. So how do you go about appointing someone you don't know? Right, you kind of have to appoint someone you do know. So, not that I'm saying it's not
understood, but
we gotta,
But on that
devil's
point,
advocate.
I agree with what you're saying. But don't you have to have some sort of arm's length from that person?
Yeah,
So it
that's
can't be
where-
your personal
yeah.
attorney. You can know of them. You can know their work. Maybe you've supped with them. Maybe you've had some lunch with them. But they're not like tight to your circle. I think that's where that conflict of interest.
It really comes to me.
in.
For me, it's just an issue.
Yeah, but
of
if I were
accountability.
governor and I would have to appoint
that's
someone,
a good way
I'd be.
to put it, Tom.
Yeah.
But if I were governor and I had to appoint someone, I'd be appointing people like you, and then they'd be like, "Well, she's friends with them," and
Right.
like they go way back.
But you're not giving them money.
What?
But you're not giving him money. So he's giving him as his personal attorney money. So he's already.
I see both sides of this issue.
Yeah,
honestly.
but money has a huge impact on what Everybody seems to think that this is a conflict of interest, and they're also bringing up Katie Hobbs as a conflict of interest overseeing her own election. But
Right.
you see a lot of these conflicts of interest out there. Okay?
Yeah.
But again, back to my point, it's about accountability. It's about accountability. You made a great point, Heather. You want somebody who is going to take information like this, hold the people that are required to be held to account, and you want them to do their jobs. And you don't want to hire somebody that's going to not do their job, because that, in essence, is going to put the embarrassment and the black mark on you. So it's important to make sure that the people that are actually doing the job can be and shall be and should be held to account.
Yes. Real quickly, I mean, there's let's see, we're up to about 1,500 people on. Please do smash that like. It'll get it out to a bunch more people. And if you're new, please do subscribe and share this stream out. This is valuable information. I mean, again, we're not dealing with conjecture. We are dealing with a letter from the Attorney General of the state of New Hampshire admitting that all this took place. They put an election monitor in place. Then now, and it's still screwed up.
Yep.
And so now the answer is to just put another election monitor in place.
Yeah, so Tuesday we get a babysitter.
Nobody's getting fired.
Insanity.
No one's getting fired.
The
Doing the same
definition.
thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Look, you own a business, okay? It's a construction company, and you construct things, okay? So you've got people out there, and they're building these things for you. And if they had done a shoddy job like the fake gallows at J6, right? And that was the work. Nails still sticking out, a gallows that wouldn't even work for hanging anybody and all that. What would you do?
You'd fire them.
You'd fire them, okay? You'd fire them, because if people can't construct things, well, that's a problem, because you're in the construction business and your name is on the line. So the governor's name is on the line. The attorney general's name is on the line. They send out these monitors. Nothing gets changed. Nothing gets corrected. Still shoddy results. Then somebody's got to get fired. And you know what's interesting? Because people say, well, fire the election monitor. Well, that's not quite how it works. So I'm going to give you a football analogy. If a team is performing that bad, right? Do they start firing the players, or do they fire the coach?
Fire the coach.
They fire the freaking coach, okay? So if you've got a work crew out there and they're doing shoddy work, first off, you're going to get fired by the person who's asking you to do the job.
Right.
And you know who you're going to fire? The foreman, right?
Correct.
Are you going to fire the foreman or just the underlings?
Well, it depends. But if it's that corrupt and it's that, if it goes that deep, you're going to just clean house. And sometimes you have to. I mean, look, we're talking about third grade math here, folks. And
Well, it's not just third grade math. It's the fact that they're misrepresenting what their findings are on their report. And I just want to come back and read one sentence from
Yes.
the conclusions of this
Which
letter.
one are we on?
This is page 8 of 9 in the letter that was sent to the Windham election officials. Tom and I, we brought up the fact that the Julia Sodi race for District 35, the results were changed. On election night, Julia Sodi was the winner. He only won by, I think, 7 votes. And after the modifications by Windham election officials outside of the public eye, Julia Sodi was declared the loser in that race. And then the only reason why Julia Sodi is serving in office right now is because there was a recount and the Secretary of State overturned the official results of our Windham election officials. You got that? The Secretary of State overturned the results. But that's not what is inferred and indicated in this report. In the conclusion section, section 4, conclusion and recommendations of appointment of election monitor, in the second paragraph, it references the fact, it references and states that these mistakes did not ultimately affect the outcome of any election. That is blatantly false. They did. The outcome, the official results of the District 35 election was that Julia Sodi was the loser.
So can you sue them for making a false statement?
it's
An official report?
creative word assignment.
That's why I'm saying people need to be held accountable, and the people who are appointed and empowered by law to make sure that our elections follow the Constitution and our election laws and procedures, they need to be held accountable too.
And look, Heather, it's important to know Bruce Breton, We were with him last night when we attended.
That's a good point. He called for the resignations of the moderator and assistant moderator, and here's another circling of the wagons and another cover-up. Instead of saying the Board of Selectmen, which Bruce serves upon, he issued a press release, a personal press release written by himself, and just signed it Bruce Breton, Windham Town Selectman. Someone out there in the blogosphere took his statement and they put the Windham Town seal on it, and then they posted it online. Our Windham Selectman then accused Bruce of issuing that press release as an official Windham Selectman document, which making it appear that he spoke for the Selectmen as a whole. And
which is a false statement.
That's a false statement. And yet, so the Windham Selectmen censured Bruce. And they talked about how Bruce illegally used the Windham Town seal, which he never did, instead of addressing the issues in the complaint, which
change the narrative?
Hold on, which three of the selectmen were also responsible and named in the complaint.
Right.
So what's going on here? The selectmen themselves, who are part of the complaint,
Wait, did they
they're
ever find
doing a
them?
redirection
Yeah, they're
and
part of the problem.
taking the eyes off of
That-
the issues.
That almost sounds like
It's very disturbing.
one of them
Yeah.
got somebody to put the seal on there.
Who knows?
Like, just think about it. If you're not on there, like who would have a motive to
Right.
take Bruce's
But
post?
the
and
the
add
point
the
the point
seal?
being though, like
The
they
people
want
in
the
the-
conversation to be about a town sale, not about all these election discrepancies and violations.
Exactly.
That's right.
That's
well,
what
let's
the, that's
talk
what
about the seal and like how it got there. I mean, I'm all for talking about the seal. Let's talk about the seal.
But
that's-
before you do that, that's not even the story. The story is an election complaint was filed.
Yeah.
There were 33 issues documented down to minutia detail with links to the official election documents detailing and showing where all these errors came up. And yet the selectmen are more concerned about something that they falsely accuse Selectman Breton of
that's-
doing
that's
that
the
he did
connection
not
I'm
do.
making.
And that
Yeah.
becomes the story.
Well, the
And
story,
now nobody else is talking about the election
No,
complaint.
but the point I'm making is that somebody that Bruce exposed in that report, in that release,
Yeah.
would have the motive to
Correct.
put the seal on there to detract from it.
Understood.
So
but
that's
then-
the connection between the seal is that
Very
my
possible.
person of interest would be somebody in that complaint if I were an investigator, and then finding out, okay, where did this seal originally come from online? Okay, this random account. Who does the account belong to? Does this account know anybody in that report? And start connecting it back, working back, right? And I guarantee you what you would find is that somehow it's connected. It's motive, right?
to the people that
Yes.
that violated.
Yes.
but see, and
that's where the cover-up comes
But
in.
that is the cover up. But to Ken's point, that changes the narrative again. What we
Correct.
want to focus
That's
on
right.
is this report.
You got to
Yes.
bring it back to the target.
You
Yeah.
got to bring it back to the target. And I think somebody should expose that. But I don't think you can deviate from the narrative of the report.
Correct.
Because that's
Correct.
not even a
And the-
freaking
and the
narrative.
complaint.
It's a report. It's not even a narrative.
Yeah, they
We're
changed the
dealing
narrative
with
to something
factual
else,
data.
pink
Right.
unicorns,
Yeah.
whatever. Just not to talk about
Deflection.
it's deflection.
Do you know what's
Correct.
interesting when you talk about this circling the wagons? And I'm going to pull it off New Hampshire for just a second. But right now in the state of Wisconsin, I saw this yesterday. Megan Wolf, who's the director of the WEC, and I don't know how closely you guys probably haven't followed Wisconsin, but the WEC is the Wisconsin Elections Commission. They did not reappoint her. She needs to be gone. And a judge just ruled this has been going on for a year, and they're impeaching her. There's a vote to impeach. Are we Tuesday? No, Wednesday? So yesterday, and I got to find out what the news is on this, but yesterday there was a vote in the Wisconsin State House to impeach Megan Wolf. Okay? Now, she's already not been reappointed. She's sitting there in her position. She doesn't have a position because a new person needs to be appointed, and they're circling the wagons around her. And interestingly, if we want to talk about Republican Democrat, the guy who's spearheading the stonewalling out there is a guy by the name of Robin Voss, longest serving Speaker of the House in any state legislature and former roommate of Paul Ryan. I could take you down to Georgia. Brad Ralston died now. But Brad Ralston, after 2020, when people were fighting for certain some things down there in Georgia, Brad Ralston actually redistricted Republicans out of their district if they weren't towing his line. I can go on. I can go to Jake Corman in Pennsylvania. I can go all over. And these are supposed to be our friends. These are Republicans, and they're actually doing more harm to anything than they are good. And it's a common story. It's everywhere. And now we see it here in New Hampshire because Chris Sununu is a governor, but they're circling their wagons. They're covering it up. And it even goes so granular as we're right down to the city level.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Wait! I gotta go back because I'm reading your comments here on the YouTube channel, and somebody's like, "Oh my God, she's lost in the Steele story instead of what really happened." I'm not actually lost. The point I'm making is that, in communication in general, when you know these narratives are going to be put out there to deflect from your story, right? One, their narratives are still out there, so you can't ignore them because people are going to hear the Steele stuff, and you have to somewhat address it. The way you do that is by pivoting. Like, okay, guess what? There's a whole report here with all these allegations and stuff like that, and you're deflecting to the seal. Let's find out who has a motive for the seal. So are you telling me, you flip the script on them and be like, and expose them for who they are, which is deflecting from the original report.
And the expose is that those individuals, with exception for one is a new, but they're actually the selectmen that were named in the complaint themselves. Right. So they're actually on the complaint.
Exactly.
So they clearly have a
motive,
and a bias.
And that's where we have to start talking about motive and stuff like this when these narratives starts getting you know what I mean? It's no different than the J6 stuff, which we won't get into, but I'm saying when you think of J6, who had a motive that day?
I agree.
That's not part of the conversation, but it's the biggest part of the conversation.
Right, but it's important to point out that the selectmen are the part of this deflection, and that they themselves did not bring it back to the fact that there are legitimate concerns in the complaint.
Yeah.
And they fail to address them, it's disturbing because they're named in the complaint.
And there's a reason, though. There's a reason why they're not addressing them. And I think we all know what it is. And
it's right here.
Oh, yeah. It's just, and that's what's crazy about reading this report and flipping through it and all these numbers and stuff like that. It goes beyond what I would say is just negligence or incompetence.
This is official malfeasance, in my opinion.
This is some what would appear to be criminal wrongdoing. There's no way you don't know. You're given numbers here. Yeah. How do you get over 1,000 the election day ballots that were shipped to Windham, 4,970, and then the ones that were sealed and sent back, 6,303. Where did that 1,333 ballots come from? How do you just stumble across over 1,000 ballots?
I don't see the AG reconciling that in this report.
Oh,
I don't see
they just
the
left
AG
it out entirely.
answering the question, where did those extra ballots come from?
And you make a great
That's
point.
a problem.
And speaking of sealing, okay.
Doesn't anybody out there find that disturbing?
1,333 ballots in one county?
In one town.
In one town. And this was the 2020, right?
And there were only...
that's 2022 primary.
Okay, so in 2022, one town in one county, 1,333 ballots that we don't know how they got into play.
That's almost 50% more ballots than voters.
And you made a good point.
Yeah, in the chat, are you comfortable with that? Would you be comfortable with this coming out of your city, yes or no? I mean, is this something you would be comfortable with?
And Heather made a good point because they knowingly, because keep in mind, this happened in 2020. So there's a monitor watching us. We have a babysitter, and they're watching those numbers. So they are knowingly committing that. So it's a reasonable question. Is this criminal?
Yeah, if it was so bad in 2020 that they appointed a freaking monitor to observe potential either criminal, negligent, whatever, and then his job is literally to find out what happened, and then while he's trying to find out, mysteriously 1,333 ballots come into play.
Correct.
I'm sorry. That's
disturbing.
Sus.
Disturbing.
Yeah, that's what my generation calls sus.
Sus.
It's so sus.
Yeah, so I mean, in the chat too. I mean, is this disturbing? And people, it's very disturbing indeed. Yes, it's disturbing. I mean, this is not something that you would find normal. If this happened in your town, I think just to bring this a little closer to home, I'm curious to people in the chat on this, but if we brought this to your town and you had these numbers and this is what was going on, what would you want to see happen? Just chat in. What would you want to see happen there? I'm serious. Like, what do you guys think should happen if this happened in your town?
And I would encourage people too, like no matter where you live in the United States, that like this could be your backyard next week, next month, next election, whatever. So you have to actively stay engaged in your civic processes and your community. Otherwise, like they're constantly looking at new places to go after, because a lot of the stuff that we're seeing all across the country in these battleground states, if all eyes are on Georgia, guess what? They're probably moving where people aren't looking. And so you have to take responsibility for your own state, your own town, your own local community, because it starts at the grassroots level if we're ever going to have secure elections.
Do you know what's interesting about that too is Georgia? I just spoke with David Cross here this last week, and they are actually moving some very good bills through Georgia right now to secure things. And do you know what I had seen a month ago? So as this process is going on and realizing potentially that these bills are going to pass, the Democrat Party has basically pulled money out of Georgia right now. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. I'm not telling you people in Georgia to stop being vigilant, but I just, to your point, if they're pulling from here, where are they going?
Yeah.
And one of your best follows on Twitter, or X, I guess I should say, is somebody that I absolutely cannot stand, but will tell you more about what's going on in the election game than anything else. And that's, what's his name, the attorney? I just slipped
Mark Elias?
Thank you, Mark
Oh,
Elias.
yeah.
Mark Elias, Democracy Docket. And if you follow what he's following,
I do.
You're going to find
Me
out.
too.
Yeah, that's where the battle is.
Well, Mark Elias,
And I want to make a point here because, a lot of people kind of poo-pooed canvassing and all this. And they said, oh, that's not what you should be doing and everything. No, do you know what? If you watch what Mark Elias's lawsuits were against after 2020, do you know what they were against?
True the vote.
Canvassing.
No, and True the
canvassing.
Vote. Yeah,
and True the
and the
Vote. But
voter
I'm
rolls.
telling you, like, if you looked at it, they were very concerned about canvassing.
Well, it's interesting because he recently lost a case here in New Hampshire.
And he lost one in Georgia.
Yeah,
Woo!
it was a
Two
redistricting
L's.
case. And the irony of that loss is if you actually read the redistricting case here in New Hampshire that he lost, they actually cite Dan Richard. Dan Richard, who's the constitutional scholar.
Yes.
We've had Dan in. Dan's a really good friend of mine, and ours.
Oh yeah.
And he blesses us with a lot of his knowledge, and I just found it remarkable that a pro se litigant, kind of schooled
Pro
Mark
se.
Elias.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Well,
so beautiful.
True the Vote just destroyed him.
Oh, my gosh,
I'm
it's beautiful.
working with True the Vote with Catherine Engelbrecht right now on a lot of election stuff. And a lot of you probably know True the Vote because they were the sort of the brains behind the investigative work in 2000 Mules, and Greg Phillips and Catherine Engelbrecht were the couple that were, or they're not technically a couple, but they were featured in there. But the big lawsuit, first of the new year, I think it was the first or second, kicked off the new year with a freaking Mark Elias loss. It was epic.
Beautiful.
And that whole thing stemmed, this is how powerful this ruling was. That all stemmed because in 2020, after the general election, but before the runoffs, True the Vote learned that there was this law in Georgia that allowed for Georgia residents to challenge ineligible voter records to their local election boards. And so the rolls in Georgia hadn't been cleaned since 2019. And so when they learned of this law, they started organizing. They had all the, they had curated this list where they compared the national change of address registry list where people were moving out of counties and out of states and stuff like that. And they compared that with the registered voter file. And then they had all this quality control measures, simplified it down to a number that was about 364,000. And now for those of you that know, some states, when they mail out ballots to all of these people on the voter rolls, and you have 364,000 potentially that don't even live there anymore, and those ballots can then be voted on, turned into a drop box. There's no chain of custody in a state where it's the margin of victory was 11,000, I think.
Yeah.
It's so astronomical. And so True the Vote, when they heard about this, like, Georgia law that allowed for residents to do this, they started, helping people and educating them on the law, the process, and people were taking up challenges, and they'd go to their election board and they'd submit these challenges with their names on it. Then the election board could look at it and say, you know what, like, we're going to reach out to the voter, like, do you live here anymore? If they say yes, provide residency. If they say no, they get taken off the roll and the challenge gets accepted. And so it's this little powerful tool that would have allowed these people to clean their rolls prior to the Georgia Senate runoff race. And Mark Elias came out and threatened to sue everybody that did this. And he threatened to sue the election boards and was like, if you take up these challenges, we're going to sue you. So True the Vote sent out a letter to all the election boards and was like, well, if they sue you, we're going to represent you. And sure enough, Mark Elias and Stacey Abrams sued True the Vote along with 5 people that they mentioned in a press release. And this lawsuit dragged on for about over 3 years. It cost over $1 million. So 7 figures in fees. And finally, it was ruled in favor of True the Vote, and was like, no, and basically what they were trying to argue, Mark Elias and Stacey Abrams, was that it was voter suppression and voter intimidation, and that they were trying to intimidate people not to vote. It was total BS. And
I'm surprised you're saying this, though, because I've read Mark Elias's posts, and the only thing he wants is fair elections. And he has stated, quite frankly, that Republicans are trying to make it harder to vote and easier to cheat.
Yeah. But like, to wrap it up, think of the power of this, right? Because they spent over $1 million on this lawsuit defending themselves. The average Georgia voter, right, that submit these challenges, they don't have $1 million to defend themselves against something like this. And so this just shows you the machine that Mark Elias is, and the importance of organizations like True the Vote that go up against them and put forth this money, because now, because of this ruling, not only is that going to empower election boards and Georgia citizens to actually utilize this resource and this tool and this law to clean their voter rolls going into 2024, but it sets this important precedent on a federal level that they won't be able to use this attack in 2024. I mean, this was a major victory to kick off 2024 with.
Huge.
And I don't think people understand the significance of, like, what that would have meant if True the Vote didn't take up this fight. Like, if they'd have chose not to fight this, like, I mean, what that would have meant, not just for Georgia, but for America. I mean, it's huge.
It's
and
huge.
So thank God for people like Catherine Engelbrecht.
Well, and that's the whole point of Lawfare and Mark Elias and what the left does.
It's the weaponization of law.
They want to scare you into submission. They want to scare you into silence. Well, that's the whole point with the J6 issue, right? It's like, hey, somebody who walked with a flag, we're going to at least charge them with parading. Yeah. What the hell, parading? I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, carrying a flag, parading, that's a crime? What? Anyways, but
think about the amount of money that taxpayers are on the hook to defend what, in my opinion, are frivolous lawsuits, that come from organizations like Democracy. I read a lot of the opinions from the judges, and for the most part, I feel like they get them right. We're seeing stuff like Bruin and Moore v. Harper coming down at the SCOTUS level, which is really realigning where, we should be, which is an originalist, point of view. I mean, it's, get back to the Constitution. That's the trust indenture we all signed up for.
Right.
Well, that's, you can take that and, a lot of my listeners will catch this comparison. But, within the church today, right, there's a lot of people who they want to throw out the Old Testament and, everything. When you look back on the early church, what did they have? What were the scriptures they had? The Old Testament. Everything that Jesus did was filling law of the Old Testament and all the prophecies of the Old Testament. The Old Testament never went away, and actually grace never went away. It wasn't that grace never went away. Grace wasn't new, okay? In this sense. Now, obviously, Christ came with a better covenant, and I can go on about that. But grace still existed because Abraham's what was credited to him as righteousness? His faith. His faith was credited to him as righteousness. He could not live the perfect life like Christ. So, and now what we have is the church doing revisionist history on the Old Testament. They're even doing revisionist history on the New Testament. And that's exactly what the left is trying to do with the Constitution.
Right.
Say that words don't mean what words mean.
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about this yesterday on the drive, but the redefinition of words. And if you allow them to control and own those words,
Right.
there's actually a real significant impact to this. We just got another super chat here. So, does New Hampshire Constitution say immunity? We do administrative governor recall are too mild. This is breaking the law. Why, how not criminal charges? It would be for us just logical. Relief could be they step down, fine. You want to address that?
Well, we have the ability to impeach, elected officials. Part 1, Article 8, accountability of magistrates and officers. All officers and magistrates of government are accountable to the people at all times. And, we would just simply have to exercise, those rights and make sure that our legislature and our judicial system, carry through with those laws and making sure that they're, held to those standards and to account. So there is mechanisms that exist to do that. It's just these letters that whitewash the wrongdoings don't help move that needle closer. Because look, at the end of the day, we need a solution.
Oh, I got one for you. I forgot to share this earlier. On the voter roll stuff, if you guys right now go to truethevote.org, they actually have this really awesome way that you can go and check to see if you're on the voter rolls in any other state that you previously lived. So you go to their website. Let me do it right now so I can make sure I walk you guys through it. But the solution, one of the best ways we can fix our elections is to clean up those voter rolls, because it's like the heart of the issues. So if you go to truethevote.org and you hit the tab button, go to engage, registration and state info, pick the state that you live.
Why don't you hold that up just so people can see? So
so it looks like this. It's like a map of the U.S. You go, you pick on your state. So I can pick on Massachusetts because I used to live there. You can also click where you're currently at. Make sure you're registered to vote correctly. But then the other thing you can do is I can literally go to Massachusetts and it'll bring you up to the state website for that particular state. You can check your registration. I checked my mom and my stepdad that moved out of Massachusetts as well. I checked to see if they were registered, and you can start seeing if you're still on the rolls in these places. Then reach out to them and demand that you get taken off. Do whatever you have to do to get your name off of these rolls in these other states so that they're not potentially exploited.
This is beautiful because obviously we have a lot of secretaries of state, state election officials who have no interest in cleaning these up.
None.
So here you can take matters into your own hand. Truethevote.org. You got to go check this out. I know we've been running now for an hour and 15 minutes. We're going to do a half hour, so we should probably bring this to a close. I'm going to get some final thoughts from each of you. We're just going to do kind of a round robin. Want to mention my other sponsor really quickly, though, MyPillow. MyPillow.com, promo code Lumberjack for big savings. Do you have MyPillow products?
I do.
My favorite product.
The sheets.
The sheets are the best.
Sheets are the best.
The best. Okay, I was just checking those sheets, those Giza sheets.
Yeah.
I never knew sheets were a thing until I had those.
Those things are great.
The best. And then I'm big on the travel pillow. I carry it with me everywhere.
I have one of the regular pillows. That's probably I have pillows all over. Good pillows too.
Yeah, and no one has invested more into the fight monetarily for election integrity probably than Mike Lindell. Go support
True
him.
patriot.
Yes, MyPillow.com, promo code Lumberjack. Let's do the round robin. I'll start with you, Ken.
I would say if people out there listening agree with Tom and I and you, Neil, and Heather, and they want to see something come of this, they can reach out to the Attorney General's office. Their email is attorneyggeneral@doj.nh.gov, and let them know that you're not happy with the report written by Assistant Attorney General Brendan A. O'Donnell.
Hold on one second. Juan, can you get that email up on the screen for him and repeat that one more time?
Attorney General at doj.nh.gov.
All right, perfect.
My in final closing would be to your listeners to get involved. Pick up the phone, go down to your local community and register to be a poll watcher.
Here, give them the phone number to call. There's the phone number for the Attorney General right there. You see it?
Yep. I'll read that off right now. So back to Ken's point earlier, if you want to reach out to New Hampshire's Attorney General, you're a New Hampshire resident, 603-271-3658. Even if you're not, and
Yeah, we're the
Sh-
first
share
in
your
the nation
thoughts.
state. We hold a very
You hold important sway.
we have a strong responsibility to make sure that our elections are run properly because we set the bar
we set the
for the
tone.
rest of the elections going through
Right.
the presidential primaries.
But these don't fix themselves. It takes involvement. It takes time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And what you really need is you need people to get involved, and that's the only way we're going to fix this. If you have people that get involved, show up, and participate in the fix of this problem.
Yes.
And I'll just say, echo what they said and just get involved. And I think truethevote.org has a lot of great resources, toolkits, and things like that. They actually have toolkits specifically on how to become an observer and all sorts of other stuff. So if you guys want to go to truethevote.org, I highly recommend subscribing to their email newsletter because it's honest to God, like the tip of the spear with election integrity. Like when you think of the money that they spent just on the Mark Elias lawsuit alone that they just won, that one lawsuit, they have other lawsuits against like the state election board in Georgia and other states. This is stuff like our GOP's not doing. Like no other organization is to that level taking on, such powerful entities. And kudos to Dan Richards and you guys, because you guys are like up and coming. Like really nobody's doing what you guys are doing either. So it's just really staying plugged in to GIP, True the Vote, getting on the email list and blocking out all the other distractions and noise that is put in your peripherals, because between now and November, we all have to stay laser focused on what is important. And there's going to be other stuff on social media that's pulling you this way and pulling you this way. Stay laser focused on election integrity. And another thing I think is super important is the illegal immigration and how that's bleeding into potentially our elections when you already have states that are allowing illegals to register in non-federal elections. Like closely watching that in your own local community, and just staying focused. So truethevote.org, sign up to the newsletter, and tons of resources.
All right, I'm going to have a few minutes of closing here because you brought up some great points. But I want to encourage people again. It's at Talk Mullins, at GOVINT Pro, both on X, or you can just go to my account. It's linked in the description below. I got it midway through the show, so if you've been watching since the beginning, you'll just have to refresh. But or it's just at Neil E. Johnson, and you can go through my follows. And I encourage you. There's a lot of great follows on this. Heather brought up a great point. Okay, this politics is drama. It's drama everywhere, about everything. And the fact of the matter is you've got to place some of that out of your head, and you've got to stay laser focused on the key issues. My audience knows the thing that I'm encouraging them, because I know where Biden's polling terribly. Okay, so there are 5 key issues that can destroy Biden, and you've got to engage in one-on-one conversations. Okay, you can share stuff on social media all you want. You know people. You have a sphere of influence. You have got to talk to them, and you have got to ask them the key questions. Because where Biden is losing it right now is the border, crime, endless wars. The weaponization of the Justice Department has become a major concern with everybody. And then the issue of elections, which is not as widely dispersed. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's not as wide. They did a pretty good job of shutting that whole thing down as far as a narrative. But you know. So you've got to get involved. Okay, so you've got to inform people. But those other 4 issues, I'm telling you, endless wars, the border, the other one's inflation, okay, crime. These are the things that you have to be asking people about in the economy. If you ask them about those things, they all give Biden failing grades to such a great degree. Sometimes it's well over 70%. Now, you don't even understand what a seismic number that is in politics, because there are literally 20% of this population that is completely whacked. Okay? It doesn't matter what you do, what you say, or anything. They're not coming out of their mental mind jumbo. Okay? But those, if you can just continually talk to people one-on-one about those issues, stay yourself laser focused on elections and doing everything you can, utilizing True the Vote. Again, you've got the governor, GOVINT Pro or GIPamerica.org. Go give them a follow, Heather a follow, and stay focused on what's real. Don't get caught up in all the drama. Stay focused. Please, people. We have a country to save. We are in a freaking war. This is 2024, okay? And if we don't stop it now, it ain't going to stop ever. I think if we lose 2024, this country is done. And I'm not saying that out of hyperbole or anything else. We are at a crossroads in this nation. It is now or never. Get involved, please. For the love of all things holy, get involved. All right? I love y'all. Keep fighting the good fight. Peace out. It's 12 o'clock.